Historically, athletes who suddenly died in front of their fans. You pay money for a ticket to watch your idol compete, but in your wildest dreams, you would never imagine that what you are about to witness are the final seconds of their life. Number 1. The baseball star whose life was taken by a dirty ball. Let us go back more than 100 years to New York. The 16th of August, 1920. The stands were packed with frenzied fans. Chapman was the brightest star shortstop of his time, with lightning-fast reflexes and unbeatable defense. The game went on until dusk, as the sun was setting and the light was fading. The opposing pitcher was an oddball. He liked throwing with an extremely unusual submarine-style delivery, releasing the ball from a very low angle with brutal force. Worse still, baseballs back then were not changed often. By the end of a game, the ball would be dirty, dark, and badly scuffed. In the evening shadows, it was almost impossible to see. Chapman, as usual, leaned slightly forward and got ready to swing. Then, the entire stadium heard a horrifying crack. The baseball smashed directly into his head. The sound was so loud that even the umpire thought it was the sound of bat hitting ball. Chapman took 2 steps forward, then stopped. His knees buckled and he dropped to the ground. His eyes were filled with confusion. Then he collapsed onto the infield dirt and never woke up again. The blow drove fragments of his skull deep into his brain. The next morning, the 29-year-old prodigy was pronounced dead. This tragedy completely changed the rules of baseball. The league immediately ordered that any dirty ball had to be replaced at once. That rule remains in place to this day, but Chapman's life was forever frozen in front of home plate. Number 2, the iron goalkeeper who died suddenly after making a match-saving stop. In indoor soccer, the goalkeeper is the team's final line of defense. In November 2017, inside a humid indoor arena in Brazil, the crowd was roaring. The tension was at its breaking point. 38-year-old goalkeeper Souza was facing an opponent's penalty kick. Every one of his teammates held their breath. The striker made his run up and fired. The ball shot straight toward the center of the goal like a cannon blast. Souza didn't back down. He stuck out his chest and blocked the deadly shot with his body. The ball ricocheted away and the danger was gone. The crowd exploded instantly in thunderous cheers. Souza raised both arms in excitement to celebrate. His teammates rushed him wildly. Everything looked electrifying, but the cheers lasted only a few seconds. The smile on Souza's face suddenly froze. He reached out blankly, as if trying to grab onto something. Then his legs gave out, and he fell. The celebration turned instantly into total panic. The team doctors rushed in and began CPR frantically. A deathly silence filled the arena, and children were evacuated. In an emergency, the defibrillator shocked his body again and again, but no miracle came. The final conclusion from the medical examiner was this: an extremely rare case of commodio cordis. The soccer ball hit his chest at the exact most vulnerable fraction of a second in his heartbeat cycle. A perfect save became the final move of his life. Number 3, the midfield engine struck down by nature. Have you ever seen someone get hit directly by lightning on a soccer field? This isn't T-movie special effects. This was a real tragedy that happened in Indonesia in 2018. That afternoon, dark clouds filled the sky and the air felt heavy. 35-year-old veteran Raharja was running on the pitch. By the 70th minute, a light drizzle began, and nobody thought much of it. Fans in the stands even opened umbrellas and kept watching. No one realized that death was already hovering overhead. At 4:17 p.m., an unbelievably bright flash lit up the entire stadium. Without any warning, lightning struck the exact center of the field. Raharja, standing near the center circle, took the full force of the strike. A massive electrical current surged through his body with the rainwater. He fell backward instantly. At first, the other players thought he had just slipped, until someone smelled something burning and Raharja lay motionless on the grass. His jersey was smoking from an unimaginable level of heat, even though the ambulance rushed him desperately to the hospital. And even though the doctors used every emergency measure they had, there was nothing they could do. 300 million volts had completely destroyed his heart tissue. From the lightning strike to the pronouncement of death, just over an hour had passed. For everyone in that stadium, that match became a psychological scar they would never forget. Number 4. the diving prodigy whose life was ended by a mistake lasting only a fraction of a second. Competitive diving is an incredibly graceful sport, but it also carries dangers that most people could never imagine. In 1983 in Canada, the diving venue at the World University Games was packed to capacity. 21-year-old Soviet prodigy Chalibashvili stepped onto the 10-meter platform. He was about to attempt what was considered the highest difficulty dive at the time, a reverse 3.5 somersault in tuck position. He took a deep breath and walked to the edge of the platform. The entire venue was so silent, you could hear a pin drop. His takeoff was perfect. He began the rotations. Just when everyone thought they were about to witness a perfect entry, a fatal mistake happened in midair. He opened his body just a tiny bit too early. That tiny movement destroyed the speed of his rotation. The tragedy happened in an instant. He failed to enter the water vertically. Instead, the back of his head slammed directly into the hard concrete platform. The sound of bones shattering plunged the entire arena into instant silence. Then he fell into the water, and bright red blood quickly spread through the blue pool. Although people nearby jumped in immediately and pulled him out, he was already in a deep coma. His brainstem had suffered catastrophic trauma, and after surviving for 9 days on machines, his young heart stopped beating forever. In his pursuit of human limits, he paid with his life. Number 5. The flyer on ice who crashed into a steel beast. The next tragedy is filled with too many coincidences and too much regret to accept. At the 1992 Winter Olympics in Albertville, France, speed skiing was the most talked about demonstration event. If you're not familiar with speed skiing, these athletes rocket straight down extremely steep slopes. Their speed can easily exceed 200 kilometers per hour. This isn't skiing. This is flying just above the ground. 27-year-old Swiss star Bochete was the king of that snow, and he was the top favorite for gold. That morning, the weather was absolutely perfect, and the mountain air was crisp and clear. Sunlight broke through the clouds and shone down on the hard-packed course, so visibility couldn't have been better. There wasn't even the slightest wind, which for speed skiing were ideal conditions for a record-breaking run. Before official practice, Bochete and his teammate decided to warm up on a nearby slope. He put on his custom-made aerodynamic speed suit and strapped on his streamlined helmet designed to cut through the air. Then, he tucked himself into a perfect bullet-shaped position and dove down the mountain like a bolt of lightning. The wind screamed past his ears, and his speed quickly climbed to around 110 kilometers per hour. Ahead on this seemingly flat course was a small rise formed by the terrain, which normally was just an ordinary transition. But that day, when Bochete flew over that rise at unbelievable speed, death was already waiting at the bottom. A massive snow groomer used to flatten the course was parked directly in the path he had to take, like a steel monster. Because of the slope, Bochete couldn't see the machine at all before he left the ground. By the time he cleared the crest and saw what was in front of him, he was going too fast. So fast that there wasn't even time for a blink. With no way to react, change direction, or brake, a heavy, muffled crash echoed across the mountain, the sound of flesh colliding head-on with steel. The enormous impact threw Bochete's body into the steel tracks of the snow groomer. Everyone nearby heard the terrifying crash, and they raced toward the scene on their skis. The medical team arrived within seconds, but the moment people saw what had happened, they lost hope. At that kind of extreme relative speed, Bochete's body had suffered damage beyond imagination. His head and his chest were destroyed, and his internal organs were catastrophically destroyed in an instant. He suffered multiple horrific fractures, and the scene was so brutal. The gifted skier died on the spot, as it was hard to look at. Later investigations found that this had all come down to a basic human communication failure. The snow groomer driver had no idea that athletes would be using that slope. Even worse, there wasn't a single official on site to give warning. Not one warning sign had been placed, as a chain of careless mistakes created this tragedy. What should have been an Olympic stage for a world record ended in heartbreak. One mistake cost a living, breathing man his life, which brings us to number 6. The youngest cycling world champion with the rainbow jersey stained red. In road cycling, there is one jersey more sacred than Olympic gold. That is the rainbow jersey, the symbol of the world champion. Only a man standing at the very top of the world has the right to wear it. In the spring of 1971, a quiet Belgian town welcomed home its proudest hero. 22-year-old Monster was one of the brightest young talents in cycling history. Fresh off winning the World Championship, he was racing at home wearing the rainbow jersey. This wasn't some earth-shaking international event, nor did it carry the pressure of a grand tour. For Monster T, it was simply an early-season warm-up race to show his form to his hometown. The course was a loop of local country roads lined with enthusiastic locals. Everyone wanted a close-up look at the young world champion. Monster looked in tremendous form, his powerful muscles producing astonishing force under the sun. His pedaling rhythm was flawless, and even without the rainbow jersey, you would know him. At the 4-kilometer mark, Monster was out front, leading a small breakaway group. Under normal procedure, the organizers should have closed off every intersection for safety. But this was a local amateur-level event, and there was a fatal hole in the security. Many local residents had never even been informed that the roads would be closed. At that very moment, an elderly man who had no idea a race was taking place. He pulled out from a side road in a small car and drove into the racer's path. In that instant, disaster struck as the car collided head-on with the group of cyclists. The other riders jerked their handlebars with desperate reflexes and barely escaped. But Monster High, on the outside of the group, was left with nowhere to go. He was accelerating at full power, and he had nowhere to go. At nearly 50 kilometers per hour, he slammed hard into the car's front bumper. The enormous rebound force threw him up over the handlebars and into the air. He smashed violently through the windshield first, then crashed onto the hard asphalt like a kite with its string cut. In that era, people still didn't fully value protective gear. All he had on his head was a very thin, very primitive leather helmet. In a crash like that, it couldn't provide even basic protection. The crowd around him let out screams of horror. 1 second, they were cheering for their hero. The next second, they were watching a scene too bloody to bear. Blood quickly spread beneath his head, staining the road a deep red. There happened to be a doctor in the crowd, and he rushed over immediately to perform CPR, but it was already too late. The impact had crushed his skull, and his cervical spine had suffered irreversible devastation. In less than half an hour, this world champion, with an unlimited future, stopped breathing on the streets of his own hometown. The most prestigious rainbow jersey in cycling was forever soaked in the blood of its youngest owner, and it became a wound the sport of cycling would never erase. Number 7. The Olympic pioneer, who was literally cooked to death by outdated medical understanding. He was also the first athlete in modern Olympic history to lose his life during competition. Let us turn the clock back more than 100 years to the 14th of July, 1912, the marathon at the Stockholm Olympics in Sweden. The weather that day was a nightmare for every runner. The temperature soared past 30 degrees Celsius. For a Nordic country used to cool weather, this kind of extreme heat was practically hell on earth. The air was thick with suffocating humidity, and there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. The brutal sun beat down mercilessly on 42 kilometers of road. 21-year-old Francisco Elizardo from Portugal was one of 68 men who started that race. He had prepared for the Olympics for a very long time, through days and nights of training, all for the chance to prove himself on the world stage. But before the race, he made a decision that would directly cost him his life. In those days, sports medicine was painfully underdeveloped. It was full of absurd pseudoscience and folk beliefs. Lazaro believed in a popular remedy among athletes at the time. He covered his body with a thick layer of animal fat, normally used for cooking. People then wrongly believed that this heavy layer of grease could protect the skin from the burning sun and lock moisture inside the body to prevent dehydration during the race. It may have sounded reasonable, but instead of helping him, it became an airtight weapon against his own body. The race began in the hottest part of the afternoon. At the beginning, Lazaro's strategy was actually very smart. He didn't blindly follow the leaders. Instead, he kept a steady and controlled pace. As he passed the crowds, spectators could clearly see the stubborn determination on his face. For the first 10 kilometers, he looked comfortable, but as the race grew more intense, the sun overhead became even harsher, and the temperature kept rising. By 25 kilometers, many runners could no longer endure the hellish conditions and began dropping out. Lazaro's body was also showing signs of collapse. That layer of animal fat on his skin was like a thick sheet of plastic. sealing shut every pore on his body. His body was generating enormous heat. Under the strain of marathon running, not a single drop of sweat could escape. His core temperature began skyrocketing like a furnace that couldn't release heat. Spectators by the roadside watched in horror as the young man's steps became unsteady. His once steady stride turned disordered and chaotic. He staggered left and right like a drunk man. By sheer willpower, he pushed on for another 5 kilometers. At the 30-kilometer mark, Lazaro's body finally crossed the absolute limit of human endurance. He suddenly veered off the course without control. His legs gave way, and he collapsed into the dirt at the roadside, completely unconscious. When race officials and medical staff rushed over, everyone gasped. His skin was shockingly hot, but unnaturally dry, without a trace of sweat. The doctor on site immediately recognized the signs of severe heat stroke. They threw cold water over him in a desperate effort to cool him down. The emergency team rushed him to a nearby medical facility as fast as possible, but the organs inside his body had already begun to fail one after another. His heart, beating wildly for the sake of running, could no longer endure that agony. After more than 10 hours of desperate treatment, the next morning, this young man died. A disaster caused by medical ignorance forced humanity to pay a painful price. These 7 heartbreaking moments came with the gasps and tears of countless people. They pushed themselves to the edge in pursuit of the limits of human ability. With the heavy price of their lives, they helped bring about the rules we have today. The greatest appeal of competitive sports is the passion, the intensity, and the unpredictability. But behind all that shining glory, these brutal accidents remind us how fragile life is. After hearing these heartbreaking tragedies, which athlete's story hit you the hardest? Or do you know of any other shocking sports accidents that once stunned the world and left people mourning? Come leave your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it in depth down there. If you think this video was carefully made and worth watching, please be sure to long press like. To give it a strong recommendation, every like and every interaction is the biggest motivation for me to keep making these hard-hitting stories. And don't forget to hit follow. Tap on my profile for more thrilling true events. See you in the next video.